Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. My name is Tom Luongo. It is Monday, May 22nd, 2017, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about. Between Trump's speech yesterday, Iranian elections, Angela Merkel losing her mind, it's all interesting. All good all the time, I guess is the way I would put it. So, hey, let's get right to it. All right. So yesterday, the big news was Trump's speech in Saudi Arabia to the leaders of the Islamic world. And I don't know if you watched the speech or not, but I heartily recommend, like Trump or don't like Trump, you need to watch it. Okay, there's a lot about that speech that is interesting, and I will tell you that to the honest but uninformed, I guess is the best word, but really probably not, to the naive layman, looked like a policy speech that was sucking up to the Saudis at a certain level, and then he laid the hammer down. It looks like a mixed bag, but I'm gonna try and decode most of the speech for you. I'm gonna tell you that I actually really liked it, and my only big problem was his insistence that Iran is the world's biggest problem, and that I think is a function of his audience, what he's trying to build, and his own personal biases. Okay, so when you put all those things together, Trump's public face when it comes to Iran is decidedly negative, and I think it's over the top. But again, this is one of those things that I fundamentally believe is probably an opening argument for him. It's one of those art of the deal opening arguments, and you'll see what I'm talking about when we get into this. But the important part here is not him sucking up to Saudi Arabia. It's not even really him carving out a big arms deal, the biggest arms deal that I think we've ever signed. It's that by laying down the law to the Islamic leaders and with the backing of Saudi Arabia, who is the leader in the Arab and Muslim world, the Sunni world, with their approval, let's not kid ourselves, they were bowing to him, not the other way around. And when you look at the optics of all of that, and he tells them, drive them out of your mosques, drive them out of your cities, drive them out of your territory, drive them out of your policy, drive them out of your thinking, i.e. the terrorists, that radical Wahhabi Sunniism needs to die. This is a message that I can get behind, and this is a message that we should all get behind. And if he can convince and unify the Arab world on this idea, and that's part of the reason why the arms deal had to be, that's the carrot. The drive them out is the stick, and the carrot is we're going to defend you. We're going to give you the tools you need to defend yourself against Iran. Okay, we're going to give you the tools you need to feel secure, because the Saudi Arabians are in a very and the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, are in a very, very tenuous position right now, economically, and then therefore politically, and then therefore societally. Okay, everything hinges on the fact that the Saudis are still running a 19% to GDP budget deficit, which is to the tune of around $180 billion a year, and it's not getting any better. And it's not going to get better unless oil can stay in the 50s, and then it'll drop to about 14%. It needs to go back to $80 or $85 a barrel, which it's not going to do. Okay? Now, part of the reason, part of the reason oil is up today, and we'll discuss oil later, is because the dollar's down, and Angela Merkel is out there talking the euro up this morning, and that also folds into this. But the big thing here is to understand that the speech yesterday was far bigger than just what I just described. It's about laying the foundation for a Mideast peace process that actually builds on the foundations already built by Vladimir Putin. And of those of you who have been following me for years at Resolute Wealth, now I've talked about this many times, that Putin and Netanyahu have been building a framework during the time between the Russian support of Syria, intervention in Syria, and Obama leaving office. They had set a lot of groundwork to craft some kind of grand bargain. And this is why I was so angry with Trump about the bombing at the Al-Sharat air base in Idlib, because it threatened to undo all of that. And then you had to take on faith that this guy, who's never shown any real understanding or nuance of foreign policy other than the Iraq war was a huge mistake, bombed the hell out of Iran, that we had any idea that this guy had this kind of understanding of what was going on. And I don't honestly think he did when he made that decision. I think Putin read him the Riot Act, and Tillerson both. And I think that he's, in the last 6 weeks, really gotten up to speed about what's actually going on down there. And has rejected, I think he's rejected the counsel of most of his National Security Council, especially H.R. McMaster and others, who are urging him to antagonize Russia, urging him, and getting that and getting the constant negative reinforcement in the media and from John McCain and everybody else. And so we're in this situation now, because I don't believe the 4D chess argument. I just believe that Trump is capable of recognizing a mistake quickly and reversing course without ever publicly acknowledging the mistake, so that it makes him look smarter than he actually is. His great strength is not his ability to see 5 moves ahead. His great strength is his flexibility and his ability to adjust on the fly. That's a very powerful skill, and very few people have it. And I think Trump has that. And he trusts his instincts in that way, and he trusts his analytic mind in the moment. Okay? He processes, I think he processes information very linearly. And so for that reason, we've seen this shift in policy. So what this comes down to is I think that we're laying the groundwork here for a Mideast peace process. And he mentioned it in the speech. It was one line out of a huge speech. We're going to discuss. I'm going to Israel tomorrow to sit down with Prime Minister or President Netanyahu and President Abbas. And we're going to discuss a framework for Israeli-Palestinian peace. And that can't happen if the Saudis feel like they're under existential threat with no backup. Okay, the Saudis and the Israelis have a very strong military lockup. Okay, and the Arabs will sign on to all of this if Israel will sign on to it and create a pull against Iran. I discussed this in a Periscope yesterday at greater detail, and I'm not going to go on forever today because I'm also going to write about this afternoon. I'll write when I get done with this podcast. It'll be up on Halsey News probably either later today or early tomorrow. The point is that this framework is actually there because you've got the United States and Russia both want peace in the Middle East. They can both act as guarantors of peace in the Middle East. Russia by backing Iran and getting Israel what they want, which is Iran out of Syria and Hezbollah neutered in some way. Okay, and the Arabs want help dealing with Iran as well. And so. And if the United States is willing to create a defense pact, a framework for a mutual defense pact for them, and get Israel on board, and Iran is held in check by Putin by continually having Putin and Rouhani focus east towards Afghanistan, Pakistan, and China, as opposed to West and the thorn in their side religiously and all that, all those old tensions that the mullahs. That the mullahs keep picking at, that old scars and old wounds that the mullahs keep picking at. That can happen, then we have a framework. And it's going to happen. Putin's already laid down, he's already made a huge concession to the Israelis by saying that West Jerusalem should be the ancestral capital of Israel. He said that a month and a half before the Al-Sharat bombing. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to piss Putin off? Do you not understand how badly you've stepped in it? How bad this looks? Okay, so now you factor all that in. On the same weekend that Rouhani, the reformer in Iran, gets a massive electoral democratic mandate. 73% of the vote, 73% voter turnout, a very, very high result. And 57% of them voted for Rouhani. Now, what's important here is understand that voter turnout was as high as it was because the younger generation was scared to death of the opposition, the arch conservative candidate. I don't remember his name. Was the hand-picked guy of the mullahs. So you're of Supreme Leader Khomeini and the other religious leaders. And so what you're seeing here is a very important statement and a shift. It gives Rouhani a lot more room to maneuver. He's got a lot more political capital today than he did 2 weeks ago, when he was worried that he was going to get thrown out of office after one term. He's got a second term now. And it's not, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Iran's going to change overnight, but this is a step in the right direction. It will give him the opportunity to further open up the economy, to further open up trade and travel, and look east towards countries that they have good relationships with, as opposed to constantly looking at and focusing on how to screw up and how to deal with and to neuter their adversaries to the west. Okay, and then that all ties into the One Belt One Road Summit, like we talked about in the last podcast, and where all that investment money is coming and all those economic opportunities are happening. Okay, so I'm not saying that there's going to be a revolution in Iran anytime soon. Now, I'm just saying that we're beginning to see a shift in the right direction. All right, now why is Angela Merkel nuts? Angela Merkel's nuts because this morning she came out and said that the euro was too weak and blamed the ECB, trying to undercut ECB President Mario Draghi, who her finance minister Wolfgang Schäuble despises. And the Germans are fundamentally and firmly convinced that the only way to get control over the EU finances is to bankrupt everybody through massive deflation and austerity, and to roll all the assets up into Germany, because everybody else is a bunch of shiftless, lazy jackasses who need to be ruled with a German iron fist. I'm dead serious. I'm not overstating this. These people are insane. And the euro strengthening here is actually, if she continues on this path, and politically now feels that she's safe enough that she can continue on this path, that Merkel is going to destroy what's left of the EU. She is bringing about its destruction if she thinks that she can continue to raise the level of the euro back up towards $1.16, or God forbid even $1.20. It would gut what's left of the Italian banking system. It would destroy what's left of Greece. It would bring Portugal and Spain's debt problems back online. It would destroy France. And it will create the setup for a super cycle spike in the dollar that will then create all kinds of havoc. The euro dollar markets are not going to reliquefy because the euro is strengthening like this. Not enough to unwind the trillions of dollars in bad debt and derivatives and derivative bets. Hundreds of trillions of dollars in derivative bets on this stuff. It's just not going to happen. So Merkel's insane. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's a classic, clueless, economically clueless Marxist politician. It's really what you need to know. The euro's not quite as short yet, but it's getting close. All right, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about real quick was an article on Zero Hedge last night about student debt Jubilee, and I was reading, some comments from various people that I follow on like Twitter and some of the other social networks, and they were all looking at it the same way the Germans are. Oh, it's irresponsible. The same way that knee-jerk Austrian economists look at this stuff as well. And I fundamentally want to smack all of them, because what they don't understand here is that student debt actually needs to be dealt with. And there's a whole class of student debt. And I'm talking about people who are in their 40s now, who are still paying off their student debts from when they were in their 20s. And because the jobs haven't been there, and because the return on investment on the degree or advanced degree hasn't been high enough for them to actually pay off their student debts, that they're now in permanent debt slavery. They all owe 2.5 to 3 times what they originally borrowed because of taxes, penalties, and interest. And then when the because they can only afford really to pay a minimum amount, which is not even enough to cover the interest. It's just enough to keep them out of receivership, which it's in itself is a horrible program. But because student debt is not dischargeable under bankruptcy, this is the only option. Okay, and so we have an entire market where these people are literally like the Greeks to the Germans, are continuing to pay on debt that is nothing more than interest and penalties. the principal's been paid back already, multiple times over. The banks have already gotten paid back, but they want their VIG, and they want the penalties. And guess what? After 15 or 20 years, or however long the payment program works, whatever's left over, whatever balance is left over. I have a friend of mine who's literally in her bill on a $40,000 student loan debt to get a master's, her bachelor's and master's, is $126,000. And when she's done with the program, she's going to still owe probably $150,000. You know what happens to that $150,000 debt? It gets added to her income that year. Let that sink in. So her husband, who makes a good middle class wage, add that to it. That's then going to be taxed at currently 39.6%. And because it's hers, she's going to be self-employment taxes. She's going to, on top of that, she's going to owe Medicare and Social Security. So about $60,000 of that is going to now be a debt to the IRS. That's what we're talking about. That is criminal. That is debt slavery. And that needs to end tomorrow. And get all of those people out from under. Write the debt down. How much could it possibly be? Start with that first $200 to $300 billion. Just write all that down. The banks can handle it. The Fed can monetize it to the banks tomorrow and be done with it and expand its balance sheet at this point by 5% to deal with this. It's nothing. Deal with it. Have them write down half of it and just be done with it. There's $2 trillion sitting in excess reserves that the banks own, that the Fed gave them. We can't write down 10% of that and have the banks deal with that. Are you kidding me? They move $200 billion a week through the reverse repo market, the reverse repo Fed window market, in order to shore up their balance sheets and stay afloat in the money in the overnight collateral markets. And we can't get rid of $200 billion worth of student debt. It's the same rhetoric. It's the same, and the moralizing rhetoric is complete nonsense. It's complete nonsense. This is theft at a massive scale, and so you should be on board with this idea, even if we just start with the oldest loans and then start rolling them forward. All right, let's get to the charts. I'll get you out of here. All right, so let's talk about gold. So I've got an article up on Seeking Alpha right now asking the question as whether or not this is the move in gold. I don't technically think so, and here's the reason why. We didn't get a 2-bar reversal here on the weekly chart, i.e. we did not break this. In order to negate this big, huge down bar here, gold needed to close above 1272.40 within 2 weeks of that bar. Didn't happen. We actually closed at 1255, and we hit a high of 1265. Today, now for this week, in order for gold to keep its bullish posture, looking at the last 3 days, this high at 1265 from last week is now third day in a row that gold has failed to even challenge that level. If it doesn't challenge that level or close above it today, even if it doesn't break through that today, gold is just not going to move much higher. This is it for this move. I mean, unless there's some other massive, black swan that's sitting out there that will push gold higher. There are other things happening. It's like there are other things happening that are bullish for gold. The euro's up this morning thanks to Merkel's comments. Yada yada yada. Oil's up this morning. I'll show you the chart on that in a second. But with gold not responding under these circumstances, this is a warning. This move in gold is pretty much finished. Now, when we look at silver, we see a similar picture, except we do see more bullishness. Now, why is that? So, again, we didn't get a 2-bar reversal here after this huge move down. And this is an enormous move. And for us to not even be able to retrace this bar within 3 weeks is crazy. And so this is a bearish situation. If you look at the monthly chart of silver, it's very bearish. Okay, so we didn't get that. But then this week, now, if you look at the daily chart, you'll see a lot of resistance right at 17. There's like 3 or 4 days where we couldn't get a close above $17. And right now, silver is trading at as I went to press this morning right after the New York Open, we're looking at 17.02. Now, again, if we get a close below $17 today on silver, 16.99, 16.98, 16.95, something like that, forget it. This rally is also going to end. This bullish impulse is over, and we're likely to move down. Okay, the statistics, the probability statistics are telling me that both silver and gold are stretched at this point, and we would need an abnormal move to get much more out of it. And I've got an article on my premium service, Stocks, Shocks, and Rocks, over at Seeking Alpha as well, detailing this, detailing how those probabilities work. And if you're interested, just check it out. All right, so looking at gold and silver again, I'm just not down with it. I think that technically we're not. This is not the false move to create the impulse higher. I think there's still one more big move down, and the seasonalities are against us and everything else. All right. So looking at oil now, is oil now the false move? Because this is a very interesting thing. So oil's at $53. The Saudis need higher oil prices. The Russians don't mind higher oil prices. They love higher oil prices. Are you kidding? They're stealing market share from the Saudis left and right all the way around the world. Again, another reason why the Saudis were willing to sue for peace with Israel. If you think my earlier discussion about all of this is daft because you think that in some way there's no way that the Arabs and Israelis will ever come to a deal, understand that the Saudis are in an existential threat position economically. There's an existential threat to their economic future. Okay, the oil market has shifted away from them. We still need the Saudis to only accept dollars for their oil. Okay, which helps to undergird the dollar markets. It helps us to keep control of global trade. Right, but we need that, and the Saudis still need us. And I think that at this point they're almost willing to accept that they're going to be much less important players in the world, but they'll actually be able to survive. Because the Saudis need like $85 a barrel oil in order to stabilize their budget, and that's the existential threat. Okay, that's why they're trying to sell 5% of Saudi Aramco, state oil company, for a $2 trillion market cap, which they're not getting. Even the jokers at Goldman Sachs are choking on trying to sell that to people because nobody's going to buy it at that price, not without better information. And the Saudis aren't even willing to give out, and these aren't even shares to give people any voting rights. It's like it's crazy, but that's how desperate they are for the cash. Okay, now with this new arms deal, I think that that's what's going to happen here is that they're going to sell 5% of Saudi Aramco. They're going to get $200 billion, and they're going to use that to pay for the arms that they just pledged to the United States. So pledged to buy from the United States. All right, so that's where we are there. And then but is this the false move in oil? So we've got a nice beautiful 2-bar reversal here on the weekly chart, right? This is a weekly chart of oil. This is Brent crude, by the way. This is not WTI, but because Brent crude is more important as far as I'm concerned. So your next area of resistance is right here at about $56, and then you've got this huge cluster of resistance right here at between 55 and 57.50. And as far as I'm concerned, this is as far as it goes. And if you get any break through this in oil on like a weekly basis, but then you get a bad monthly close, forget it. That's as high as it goes, and then it's going to crash after that. And then we'll see it back into the 40s later on. And it'll be the deflationary move that sets up maybe a correction in the stock market, final correction in gold, all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm thinking looking ahead. I'll see if I'm right. We'll see if I'm wrong. But that's my read right now, and you can position accordingly. I don't think there's a trade here in oil. I would wait for it to get to $56 a barrel, and then you maybe consider putting a short on with a very tight stop. All right, that's what I got. So look for $17 close today in silver. Look for gold to try and challenge the 1272.50. And if neither of those things happen, at least early this week, if not today, then tomorrow, you can consider this impulse over. Same thing with oil. Let's watch to see if it actually has legs to $56 a barrel. If it does, it may actually push gold and silver up a little bit. But if they don't respond, that's a great signal. That divergence is a great signal. All right, guys, you take care. We'll talk to you in a couple of days. Keep your stick on the ice.